Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So let's just get right on into it. So today's video is going to cover a few different things. So this is actually going to be an enclosure review, and I'm also just going to talk a little bit about the animals that I keep in this enclosure because they're an animal that hasn't really been on my channel much before. So today I'm going to be reviewing the new 2x2x4 Zen Habitats enclosure. And I'm currently using this enclosure for my two giant leaf-tailed geckos. So before we go into the enclosure review, I do want to talk to you guys about giant leaf-tailed geckos a little bit because, as I mentioned before, these are an animal that I have that have not really been on my channel very much. So I currently own a pair of giant leaf-tailed geckos, so this means I have a male and female. So giant leaf-tailed geckos is typically the common name that you will hear, or sometimes you'll just hear Fimbriatus geckos. Their scientific name is Uroplatus Fimbriatus. So this now is a species of gecko that I've been owning for almost a year and a half now. I received my pair back in May of 2019, so it's been about a year and 4 months that I've had these guys. Let's get a little bit of information on these giant leaf-tailed geckos now, and then we will talk about the enclosure that we're going to be reviewing today. The scientific name for these species is Uroplatus Fimbriatus. Now, I don't know if I'm saying that right because I don't speak Latin, but that's how I say it. So Uroplatus Fimbriatus are found only on the island of Madagascar. You're not going to find them anywhere else, at least in the wild. Captivity, however, you will find them all around the world. So I'm sure it's pretty obvious where these guys get their name from. If you look at their tail, it's very clearly shaped like a leaf. So the giant leaf-tailed gecko and many other leaf-tailed geckos are named leaf-tailed geckos because of the shape of their tail. I feel like that's pretty obvious, but I'm gonna tell it to you guys anyways. So these geckos are arboreal, which means they spend almost all of their time up in the trees and on bushes and vines and stuff, so rarely will you ever find these guys on the ground. These guys have incredible camouflage skills. Not only do their tails resemble leaves, which can help them blend in with certain surroundings, but just their colors and patterns really help them to blend in with tree bark and stuff like that. These guys do come in a variety of different colors and patterns. They all look relatively the same, but no two of them are exactly alike. Some are more brown, some are darker, some are lighter, and things like that. Some have more colors on them. So it's really interesting to see the variety in this species. These guys like a lot of humidity and not a lot of heat. I'm not going to go into detail because this isn't a care video, but hopefully just saying these things will help you guys get a little more information on them and understand why I have their enclosure set up the way that I do. So these leaf-tailed geckos are entirely insectivore. They're not like a crested gecko or a gargoyle gecko who's going to be eating a Pangea or a Rapashi mix. These guys will only eat insects. Leaf-tailed geckos have always fascinated me because they're just such a unique species of gecko. You know, they look so cool and so different from so many other species. So now that we've learned a little bit about these geckos, let's get back into the main portion of the video. So now that we've learned a little bit about the animals that I'm keeping in this enclosure, let's talk about the enclosure itself. The enclosure that I'm going to be talking about today is a 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot enclosure by Zen Habitat. So it's 2 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and then it's 4 feet tall. So this specific enclosure here that I'm reviewing is more of an arboreal enclosure rather than a terrestrial enclosure. And now these enclosures are also fairly new. So Zen Habitat started out making really only terrestrial enclosures. This is basically the opposite of that now. You take that enclosure, turn it on its side, and this here is what you get. One of the reasons I'm really excited to review this enclosure is because they only actually recently started selling in Canada. As many of you guys know, I live in Ontario, Canada. So for a while when Zen first popped up as a company, I wasn't able to get any of their products because they were only shipping in the US. However, earlier this year they actually expanded and they now are offering shipping to Canada as well. So for all of my Canadian viewers out there, you can now get Zen Habitat enclosures if you like. With all of this said, I do want to disclose that I was sent this enclosure for free. I did not pay for it. I am not getting any payment from the company or anything, so all I received was a free enclosure in exchange for a review on it. So I want to point out that even though I did get this enclosure for free, I'm still going to be entirely entirely honest in my review. I do also want to mention that I do have an affiliate link with Zen Habitats. So if you guys make a purchase using my link, I do get compensation for that. Again, I just want to disclose all this. So with all that said, let's talk about the affiliate link in a little bit more detail now. As I mentioned before, I am an affiliate with Zen Habitat. This means that I do have an affiliate code with them, which you guys can use if you would like to purchase a Zen Habitat. I do want to make it clear that since I am an affiliate, if you use my link, I do get a small commission for it. However, it would really mean a lot to me if you are considering purchasing a Zen, if you would consider using my affiliate link. If you are interested in using that link, it will be just down in the description below. So once again, if you are considering a Zen Habitats enclosure, maybe consider using my affiliate link, as it would really help me out. Alright, so now that you guys have got a little bit of a rundown on the animals that I'm keeping, and you got a little bit of a rundown on the enclosure that I'm going to be reviewing, let's just go ahead and head on over to this enclosure now and take a closer look at it. So right here beside me is the enclosure that I have been talking about. So this is the enclosure that I have set up for my pair of Uroplatus Fimbriatus, or giant leaf-tailed geckos. So if I go and open her and give you guys a little first glance at it, this is what you will see. That clip that I just showed you guys, you might not have even realized that one of my geckos was right here on this branch the entire time. So this girl right here is Saturn, and Saturn is my female giant leaf-tailed gecko. So Shadow is a little bit more difficult to see. Right now he's just hanging out on this back wall right there. So when I pull back, he's basically entirely covered by the plants. So Shadow is the male of the pair, and Shadow is a lot more shy than Saturn is. I definitely see Saturn out in the open far more than I see Shadow. So as mentioned before, Saturn and Shadow both live in this 2x2x4 Zen habitat. So now let's talk about the enclosure a little bit more in detail. So Zen habitat enclosures come flat packed. So this means that all of the panels and everything like that are all flat packed into one box. This really helps reduce shipping costs, because the smaller the box, the cheaper it is to ship. However, it does mean that you have to assemble the enclosure yourself. So they do have really simple instructions to follow when putting together the enclosures, and I will honestly say that putting together the enclosure is pretty easy. However, I do want to be entirely honest and say that I did have a little bit of an issue when I was assembling it. However, I know that it was an issue on my part. It was my fault that this happened, and basically just what happened was when I was putting the pieces together, I accidentally put one of the pieces in the wrong way. So then when I had to take them apart, I was getting really frustrated and I ended up breaking one of the pieces. It wasn't a big deal. I was able to fix it with some duct tape. So I do just want to point it out that they do have really easy instructions to follow for putting together the enclosure, and it is really simple as long as you don't make any mistakes, because that mistake that I made just made me so frustrated, and it definitely did take me a while longer than it should have to put the enclosure together. So yeah, I just wanted to be entirely honest and put that out there. So I do think the enclosure is easy to assemble. However, I did make a mistake and I ended up having to fix it with some duct tape. So there we go. So the first part of the enclosure I can think of that seems like a really relevant part would be the actual side panels to the enclosure. So as you can see by looking at the enclosure, if you take a look at it, there are bamboo panels on the side. So right on the side, the back, and the bottom of the enclosure are all of these bamboo panels that I was telling you guys about. So these panels are relatively lightweight. They aren't super heavy or anything, and so they're very easy to carry around and they're very easy to assemble together, so that is a big bonus. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of the look of the bamboo panels, but that is entirely just my preference. Color isn't really a big deal to me. What is mostly important is that I have a suitable enclosure for my animals, and in my opinion, this really does the job. Like that, I think that they are great side panels and they definitely do what they need to do. Now let's talk about this piece right here. So the door. So this right here is the door to the enclosure, and as you can see, it's basically just a plain sheet of acrylic. I I personally really like this design as the door because it makes it super easy to see into the enclosure. You know, there's no like bulky siding on the door or anything like that. It's just entirely a plain panel of plexiglass. I think it makes it look very clean. Like I said, you have the entire front to view from. Really provides a good viewing panel. Something I like about acrylic too, as opposed to glass, is that it is more transparent. So if you're looking through this versus looking through a glass enclosure, there's going to be less reflection on the acrylic one, meaning it's easier to see through. However, I do want to mention that acrylic does scratch quite easily. So if you do have an animal that scratches a lot or anything like that, be prepared for the acrylic to get scratched up a little bit. But for something like a leaf-tailed gecko who really doesn't scratch at all, I really don't have to worry about that. So personally, I really like the acrylic door. The latches to the door are another thing that I really like. I think that they're very sturdy. I have no worries about my animals being able to open these or to break out or anything. The latches also make an easy like handle to grab onto just for opening the door. So there is no other like specific door handle here. You really do just like grab the latches or anything like that and then pull it open. And now the last part of the enclosure that I want to talk about is basically just all of the metal parts of it. So the entire enclosure is basically held together by these aluminum beams. So once again, because these beams are made from aluminum, it means that they're super light and really easy to work with. Again, it's not like a super heavy piece of metal you have to carry around and deal with. It's extremely light. The aluminum here also doesn't rust or anything. And then there's also a metal screen top. So the screen lid on top of the enclosure is made out of galvanized steel. Because it's made out of this metal rather than a typical enclosure mesh you would see, it's really sturdy, it's very firm, and it can support quite a bit of weight. Obviously, I don't recommend just like purposefully putting a whole lot of weight on top of your enclosure, but for whatever reason, if you need to rest something on top of there, it can support the weight. So overall, these like three main components of the enclosure that I talked about, such as the panels, the door, and the metal in it, personally, I am a fan. I think that they all work really well, and they definitely do the job that they're supposed to. Like I said, I do like the sides. I feel that they are very sturdy. They definitely do their job. I don't have to worry about them breaking or anything like that. Same with the aluminum. The aluminum holds everything together really well. Despite aluminum being a really soft metal, it definitely holds the enclosure together really well. I don't have any fears of the aluminum just like snapping and bending and stuff. It's definitely well supported. And then, as I mentioned, I do really like the door. I am a big fan of the door just because it provides such a good viewing panel. So I am a big fan. So with that all said and done, I think that we should just go ahead and kind of do a little more detailed tour of inside the enclosure, just so you guys can get an idea of what it looks like and how I keep my giant leaf-tailed geckos. As you guys have already seen, this is the enclosure here. So here is what the enclosure looks like once it's open. So let's talk about basically just like why it looks like this, why I chose to set it up this way, and all that stuff. So as mentioned earlier, giant leaf-tailed geckos are an arboreal species of gecko, which means they spend almost all of their time up in trees and plants and stuff like that. Rarely will you see one of these guys on the ground. I think it's very interesting to talk about this because while they are arboreal animals, you know, their care isn't the same as just any arboreal animal. For example, look at this enclosure right here. So this enclosure is set up for a chameleon, who is another arboreal animal, and even one that comes from the exact same place where these geckos come from. So both this gecko and this chameleon right here, this is Felix by the way, so both of these animals come from Madagascar, and they're both arboreal animals. However, if you look at these enclosures side by side, you'll notice that one of them has most of the branches going this way, you know, they're all horizontal. And if you look at this enclosures, most of the branches here are all vertical. So the reason for this is basically just because leaf-tailed geckos mainly like to hang out on vertical surfaces. They don't really use horizontal branches and stuff. If I were to put a horizontal branch in here, I can guarantee you they would barely ever use it, other than maybe just like climbing on top of it. For the most part, these guys like to be entirely vertical. You can look at Saturn right here and she's completely vertical. I don't know where Shadow went. He ran off somewhere. Can guarantee you he's probably also entirely vertical. I'm gonna look for him now. So we have Saturn right back there. My camera's having a hard time focusing on him because the lighting is so bad here and he's like behind all that stuff. But anyways, yeah, Saturn is right down there on the trees. That's just the main reason for the branch configuration here. I do have quite a lot of branches. Honestly, when you look in here, it doesn't look like there's as many branches as they are, because a lot of them are just hidden behind plants. If you look up here, I have these 2 branches. I have them zip tied together to hold them in place. But then this cork branch just goes all the way down like this, and it goes right down to the bottom. And then if we look at this other branch right here, this is just like a jungle vine or something. So this one's slightly less vertical. It does go a little bit this way. You can see we have another branch here that goes down. It's behind this bush right here, where you can see a few other branches, including the one that Saturn is on. This branch right here is probably the most horizontal branch in the enclosure, and the main reason for it was just to act as a support branch that I could zip tie other branches to. And then right in the back here we have another big branch. I do have a mix of live and fake plants. Ideally I would like to have all live plants in here, but that'll take a little bit of time to switch everything over. So for now I have this one big mass cane. It's just like what they're normally sold as. I have this right in the middle of the enclosure. So this here is a live plant. This is only live plant currently, but I do really like having it in here. It does provide a lot of big leaves that they can hide behind and hide under and stuff, and the leaves also catch a lot of the water when the enclosure's misted to allow them to drink. Fake plants don't hold water as long as live plants do, so they dry up a lot faster. So I really do think that having live plants is really beneficial. But then on top of the live plants, I do have a few fake plants in here, basically just to add some extra coverage. So this big fake plant right here, basically, you know, it covers a lot of branches right here. So if they ever are just feeling like they need to hide really anywhere behind that, this fake plant provides a lot of coverage. And then I have 2 fake plants hanging from the top of the enclosure as well. Probably should have mentioned this earlier, but these Zen enclosures have these metal beams that go across the top, so that makes it super easy to attach things to it. I right now just have fake plants attached to it, but I know many other people use those bars to attach things like heat lamps and UV lamps and stuff. I do have a UV lamp on this enclosure, however I did choose to put it outside rather than inside. Some people choose to put them inside, but since these geckos are arboreal and have sticky feet and can climb right up walls and stuff, I don't want to risk them being able to touch the fixture. And also this enclosure does get misted, so I don't want water getting on the fixture. So I chose to put the fixture on the outside. Anytime you put a light fixture outside of an enclosure, the mesh is going to block some of the UV rays. However, I do have a UV reader, and the amount of light getting in here is still entirely adequate for my geckos, so it works for me. However, depending on what animal you're keeping and their lighting requirements, you may want to keep it inside the enclosure. Now that all of that is said and done, now that we've done a little review and learned a little bit about my leaf-tailed geckos, I think I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here. No point in really rambling more than I need to because I'm such a rambly person. So yeah, let's end the video here. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Before we end things though, I do just want to remind you guys that I do have an affiliate link with Zen. So if you guys are interested in purchasing one of those, it would mean a lot to me if you would use my link. As I mentioned earlier, I do receive commission from this, so just to be entirely honest. However, if you do want to use it, it is there for you. So I just want to thank you guys again for watching this video, and I do really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me if you did. Also, be sure to check out all of my social media. It will just be in the description below, but yeah, I would appreciate it if you guys gave me a follow over there. I love interacting with you guys on social media, so please go and do that if you'd like. All of that said, I'm just going to go ahead and end the video here. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.